Okay, welcome to another edition of Carnivore Bites. I'm your host, Jeff Sherman, along with Dr. Eric Lopkin. A lot on the world stage, Dr. Lopkin, and certainly a lot on the political stage. Let's look at the political stage. Hard to separate both. But a lot going on. It's very interesting as a conservative and someone that is aghast at what's been going on over the last 2 years. That I was gravely, and might be a little extreme, but I was definitely concerned about the possibilities or the inevitability of the Republicans taking over the Senate. In fact, I was giving the Democrats about a 55% chance of holding on to the Senate. We talked about it last week, and I reversed that to 55 Republicans. But it looks like Carnivore Bites again is dead on the both of us because now there's major news pieces coming out and saying has the Democrats peaked too early after Roe versus Wade? And I would have to say yes because now real clear politics, not exactly a right wing organization. Let's see, now breaks it down to the Republicans, or I'm sorry, Democrats 48 seats, Republicans 52. Dr. Lopkin, what does that mean, assuming, and it's a pretty good assumption, that the Republicans take control of the Congress? What does that mean to the Biden administration? What does it mean politically? What does it mean to America?
Well, I mean, it's certainly the end of the Biden agenda.
Check, please.
And
No, is it too extreme to say check, please?
um it might actually be a little too extreme because here's the problem. The Republicans will be able to stop Biden from doing anything going forward. But there's nothing indicating they're going to have a veto proof majority in the Senate, which means they can't actually overturn anything that he's already done. Um,
Yeah,
because
but
he
let me
would
just
just
interject one
veto
thing.
it.
I agree with you 100%. That's true. There can be legislative initiatives to minimize the damage that's been
Yes.
done. But when I say check, please, I believe at that particular, not too far from that point, if it does in fact happen, he will announce these. The pressure, the night of the long knives will be in ultra drive, in super drive, and he will announce that he's not running because he wants to focus on the dire problems and the threats to democracy facing this great nation.
The odds are certainly in that favor, although comments that he himself has made indicate that he does not want to make the decision of whether or not to run for reelection until he knows if Trump is running again. He seems to want to face Trump again because he's convinced that he can beat Trump again and get his legacy back. Honestly, I don't think he can beat Trump again. I think now that the Hunter Biden information is out there, now that we've seen the results of his policies, independents are not going to swing to him. Moderate Democrats might actually stay home altogether. So I don't think he can beat Trump again, but I think that's what he's actually waiting for. He wants to run against Trump. Now, whether or not the Democratic Party, who clearly does not want him to run again, can convince him otherwise, that remains to be seen.
They might actually even convince him by primarying him, like 1980 with Carter
Well,
and
he's going if he runs again, he's going to have primaries.
I believe he could
Um,
lose
I believe Gavin Newsom will primary him. Elizabeth Warren is going to be a perpetual candidate at this
without a
point.
doubt.
She's going to primary him. Um, Newsom might be able to beat him. Warren wouldn't isn't going to stand a chance, but if it goes that far. Now, remember historically, no incumbent president that has been primaried has lost the nomination. So the odds are still in his favor. But every incumbent president that has been primaried has lost the general.
There's
So
no doubt.
as soon as if he says he's running and other Democrats decide to primary him, it's pretty much game over. The Republicans will take the White House.
Yeah, I agree with your analysis 100%. I still believe that there's going, no matter what he says, and I don't even know if he remembers what he said like last week or an hour ago, but I still believe that the pressure on him to step aside, because you're looking at a potential calamity, a
Oh, yes.
a Armageddon, a political Armageddon. I believe the pressure in the party will be. Listen, before this even happened, that is the midterms, people were basically saying that they weren't sure if he should run. I think he will be a lame duck. I think he will step aside. I know he has no judgment, no personal sense of judgment or wherewithal. But I think the pressure on him will be too much. But we'll wait for to see if that happens. Now you talked about the political landscape. It's pretty interesting about the New York Times poll on independence, isn't it, Dr. Lopkin?
It is independent women, according to this poll, in just the space of a month, flipped massively to the Republicans. And liberal pundits are going, oh, this has to be wrong. There's no way this could happen. And the basic problem is that for most women, especially moderates and independents, the key issues are education, crime, and the economy, not necessarily in that order. The Democrats have been making the assumption that they are going to have a lock on women because of the abortion issue. And most women, according to not just the New York Times polls, but numerous polls, don't consider abortion a major issue for this election. I think at best it's coming up fifth.
Yes, I think you're right. And let me just interject something. I also, and I'd like your opinion. I'm sure our listeners as well would like your opinion. I think also when you juxtapose the radical, right to the time of birth platforms of many radical Democrats with some moderation in terms of some kind of a time limit, I think most, even independent women, are not for abortion at the time of birth, which is essentially murder.
No, in fact, there have been polls that showed 83% of Americans actually are in favor of some limitations on abortion. So the 15-week, 20-week that was in Roe v. Wade, uh, those are viewed as very popular. The idea of having abortions later than that, which is what the radical left is pushing, is actually turning people off.
Which I think is an interesting phenomenon, Lopkin, because initially with the overturn, if you will, of Roe versus Wade, that it was a hot button and did rally the troops, the Democratic liberal troops, and that's one of the well, not the only, but one of the reasons for the turnabout in the red wave, if you will. But I think as the more, and I think it's a great strategy for Republicans and conservatives and right to lifers, and even people that believe in a rare abortions like Clinton and the previous Democratic Party did, that when you juxtapose that to abortion at birth or at the time of birth, that's a bridge too far for even most liberals. Do you agree? And it ceases
It
to be a hot button issue or a lightning rod issue.
All right. Well, again, according to the polls, that is true. That is what people are saying. They're actually coming forth and saying, "No, we don't want abortion up until birth. We want reasonable limits." They also, according to these polls, want exceptions for to save the life of the mother. And again, most even most pro-life people are actually in favor of that. So there is actually a middle ground that the moderate Republicans, moderate Democrats, and independents could actually push through an abortion law that about 83% of Americans would be happy with.
Agreed. So we do agree that it did turn the tide a little bit in this summer, in August and September, but the other issues of taking precedent over the abortions, especially when it's juxtaposed to the radical abortion agenda, correct?
Yes, I mean, James Carville has been yelling at the top of his lungs. He was the one that coined the phrase, it's the economy, stupid. And that still holds. That is the issue that is most affecting Americans. And
Okay.
even Bernie Sanders has said we need to stop talking about abortion. That's not what the voters are interested in.
By the way, speaking of Mr. Sanders, someone I really have to be honest with you, despise. Um, he actually is going to hit the campaign trail to try to rally the troops because he believes that there is a lack of enthusiasm, which I actually, one of the few things I would actually agree with him on, is a lack of enthusiasm in the party. What effect, if any, does he have on his goal to rally the base or the troops?
I don't I mean the Democrats are pulling out all the stops because
I think
at this
zero. How does
point
that sound?
they're desperate. Bernie Sanders is hitting the campaign trail. I don't think he's going to have any effect because everybody knows that he is behind these left-wing policies that are destroying the country. Joe Biden is actually hitting the campaign trail in California, in Oregon. I think he may actually swing several elections to the Republican.
And actually, that's
There,
no joke. I actually
no,
concur with that.
I'm not joking about that. Barack Obama is hitting the campaign trail.
I think he has a positive influence. I'm not a big
He ha-
fan of his, but he does. He could sell ice to Eskimos. Greatest
he is
salesperson ever.
yeah, he is an amazing salesperson. Honestly, though, he's starting on the campaign trail next week. Early voting in many states is already underway. I think his impact is actually going to be minimal simply because it's going to be too little too late. If he had started campaigning for Democrats 6 weeks ago, I would say it would have had a much larger effect.
Why would he ever leave his house in the Hamptons and the party lifestyle that he's come to very comfortably embrace after being a basically minimum wage community organizer? I wouldn't
Well,
leave
he
either.
would, well, no, I think the reason he would have, and the reason he is now, but should have done it
He thought
earlier,
it was not going
is
to happen.
because there's only one thing Barack Obama really cares about, and that's his legacy. Well,
True.
the Democratic Party has just decimated his legacy.
But isn't it like a vampire? Doesn't it always rise? I mean, we thought it with Trump it was done. I mean, yeah, initially, except for being the first African American president, his his time on the helm, or yeah, time on the helm was an abject disaster
It
in many
was,
ways.
but we keep seeing this with both parties. During the Clinton years, there was talk that the Republican Party was dead. It was never going to come back. We've talked about, and they mentioned it, it came again during the Obama years. The Republican Party was never going to recover from this. And then Trump proved them wrong. During the Reagan and Bush years, there was talk the Democratic Party was finished. It was never going to both parties always come back.
Oh
No
no,
defeat is no
but I'm not
defeat
even
is
speaking
ever permanent.
of the. I agree with that, but not the parties. I'm talking about him. When is it going to become? I mean, when does it happen where people wake up and say, "This guy, he's good looking, he's articulate, he's a great salesperson, but he was a shitty president and his policies suck and they continue to suck." Will it ever happen? I doubt it.
I don't think it will ever happen because again, to this day, when and I saw it mentioned in several media commentaries when they were talking about him hitting the campaign trail. When you criticize his policies, you are labeled a racist. And the Democratic Party has doubled down on that. So he's never really going to go away. It's like, oh, you just don't like him because it's racist. You're a racist. Well, the fact of the matter is, no, it's not racist to not like Obama's policies. His policies have proven time and time again to be garbage. Take a look at the Affordable Care Act. This was going to lower healthcare costs. Healthcare costs have been rising ever since it was passed. There has been no benefit to any of his policies.
I actually believe he's one of the most destructive presidents in modern history. Obviously, there's people like Buchanan and others that are far worse, but the social and economic and attitudinal
He
damage he did with America is right up there with the top.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know that he's the most destructive in history, but I would
No, I didn't say
certainly
that.
say,
I'm saying
oh, what's it?
in recent history.
Oh,
Yes,
yeah. I mean, certainly he did even more damage than Carter did.
no doubt.
And I think g- you could probably go back to Lyndon Johnson, that he's did the most destruction since Johnson.
I
But
would say that's true.
I
Yes.
I think that's actually changed now because now Biden has done more damage than Obama did.
Well said. Yes, you're right. Because I thought, who Johnson, who gets a free pass by the liberal intelligentsia, one of the shittiest and most destructive presidents, started the descent of America in no uncertain terms. He gets a free pass. God knows why. But yes, I think Biden now has, excuse me, now has the trophy and a well deserved. Nowadays everyone gets a trophy. Well, his is actually well
Yeah,
deserved.
yes, it is. And in fact, I've seen a couple of interviews, just man on the street interviews, and across America, and they're all saying almost the exact word for word statement. They're going, I could never believe he could do so much damage so quickly.
Wow. Well, I'm in that club. You think
Yes.
2 years. You look at Carter. Yeah, there was some. No one has done a better job in effing things up than Amtrak Joe,
And again,
Aviator
in
Joe.
in the Politico interview that Obama gave, he said point blank, never underestimate Joe's ability to F things up.
And that's one thing I'd have to say that Mr. Obama, President Obama, was 1,000% accurate on.
Yes.
But looking at the political landscape again, we talked about the Politico assessment 48-52 in favor of the Republicans. We also look even in our home state where we do carnivore bites. There was a poll that made the national news, a WTIC poll that had Blumenthal only ahead by of Nora Levy by 5 points. Now, do I think he's going to lose? No, but if he ever did, let's just fantasize for a second, Dr. Lopkin. How much of a shockwave would that be?
That would be a major shockwave. Yeah, he is going up against Leora Levy, and Donald Trump has endorsed Levy, and he is actually doing a fundraiser for her shortly. Blumenthal has raised more spending. He is spending, like a drunken sailor to try to keep his seat. The fact that in deep blue Connecticut, he is 5 points away. And let's not forget that the margin of error on these polls is generally 3 to 4%. So he's barely outside the margin of error.
And
We
let me just
all
interject. Another thing is, if you look at Democrats slash Republicans, a 5% given enthusiasm, participation rates, that is almost a dead tie.
It is. And you also have to remember that we've seen this nationally, but in Connecticut, it happens even more often that conservatives, Republicans don't answer polls.
What would you handicap it at?
Honestly, given the results of that poll and given the blue bias to polls in Connecticut, I'm actually going to give it a coin toss.
I would say 65% Blumenthal, but that is an earth shattering number, even 65%. He went from, because I follow this thing very, very closely, in other words, all the political polls and everything else for the show and for my own edification. Connecticut was solid blue, and now it's light blue. almost getting to the toss up. So you may be right in the end, Dr. Lopkin, as you always
I mean,
are.
I don't. Yeah, I don't. I mean, I don't know. Well, I mean, let's face it. Saying it's going to be a toss up is safe because no matter who wins, I said, well, I said it was a toss up. But it is absolutely amazing that deep blue Connecticut has a race that's that close. That Rhode Island has a seat right now that is actually expected to go to the Republican. It's a seat a Republican has not won in 40 years. New York, deep blue New York State. Right now, it's looking like the Republican may take the gubernatorial race.
That is a
Or
definite toss up, no doubt.
Oregon is now looking like it's possible it's going to elect Republicans. That's actually why Joe Biden is going out there to campaign.
Well, I just
He
wanted to interject something on that. It's not. It's going to go from toss up to solid red if he does show up. Just
Oh,
kidding.
yeah. I mean, it is absolutely amazing how many places that just 2 years ago would never have elected a Republican are now looking like it's possible. Now, a lot of these are long shots. The Republicans are not going to take all of them. But even if they take one or two, even if they take, and to give you an example, when I worked as a political consultant in New York City, I ran a city council campaign for the Republicans. And the Republican lost this race 60% to 40%. Okay, now that sounds like a blowout. That 40% was the highest percentage a Republican had gotten in that district in more than half a century. The Democrats were running scared because they only got 60% of the vote. If Blumenthal loses in Connecticut or wins by 60% of the vote and not more, that is a major happening. And it's something that the party is going to have to take into consideration.
In spite of the Republican Party in Connecticut. Now, before we get in more into the political realm, let's just digress a little bit, and for our listeners out there, and maybe for our own edification, take a little comical visit to Joe's remarks of the week, saying that the economy was strong as hell as he ate his Baskin Robbins chocolate chip, whereas Bloomberg gives the odds of a recession 100%. He also said that gas prices have always been $7 a barrel. I mean a gallon
Yes.
in California, and then he insulted, yes, a highly flawed ally. But again, he never, as Mr. Obama says, never lost an opportunity to screw things up, and he insulted Pakistan, and probably at a very critical time when we may need even a very flawed ally.
Absolutely, but it's not just the flawed allies. He also came out criticizing the United Kingdom, saying, well, they didn't have a strong economic plan. He also insulted several other EU members, saying that the world inflation is their fault because they're not economically strong. He is blaming everybody for everything except himself. He refuses to take any responsibility. And he said in an interview, he actually said the words, that he does not see a recession coming. Of course, he doesn't see a recession coming. He didn't see the Taliban taking over Afghanistan. He didn't see inflation. He didn't see high gas prices. He never sees what's in front of his face.
No, he does not, but he does have the he does like to create his own visions, much
Yeah,
like Stevie Wonder. When he told a audience that his son Bo, and I mean, I'm sad that Bo died, but I am so sick of Bo. Um, he died. Do you know this, Doctor Lopkin? He died in Iraq in the heat of combat.
yeah. This is the latest uh, pathological lie that Biden has told. that that Bo Biden died in combat in Iraq. No, Bo Biden, and yes, Bo's death was a tragedy, but Bo Biden died after a prolonged battle with brain cancer in the hospital at home, not during combat, not in Iraq. And this is a well known fact. And again, we talked about this last week. This is one of those lies that Biden tells that I do not understand why. It's very easily fact checked. Everybody knows how Bo Biden died. He's not getting anything out of this lie, and yet he continues to do it. Now, again, either he is a pathological liar,
Always has
in,
been.
incapable of telling the truth, or his mind is even further gone than any of us thought, or possibly both.
Probably both. And I'd say one thing, you know, approaching 80. You have to worry about health problems. One problem he does not have to worry about is brain cancer because you do need a brain.
Yeah, I mean, his brain is gone.
Gone,
It
finished.
is. I mean, this was one of those cases that, and something else, nobody in the mainstream media bothered to mention this, but the clip of him saying the economy is strong as hell while eating his ice cream, everybody focused on the comment, everybody focused on the ice cream. What nobody seems to have been focusing on is is the fact that if you watch that clip, he is very inappropriately close to a child. And there are photos of him being inappropriately close to children before. We know that his own daughter's diary accused him of being a pedophile. So, this is something else that really people were so upset about the mean tweets and how Trump allegedly treated women, but it was okay to elect a pedophile.
No, and that's not so far from the truth. I mean, that clip that you're talking about, he actually was. You would be fired in areas like teaching, anywhere that you have, are you responsible for younger adults and younger people? You would be fired. He was all over her, and he literally said to her, "Don't have a serious boyfriend till you're 30." That is this, in today's woke environment, it's obviously not appropriate, but it's never been appropriate. He's a real weirdo. He's a creep.
He really is. And, talking about unintended consequences, the election of Joe Biden effectively killed the Me Too movement. Remember how big the Me Too movement was during the Trump presidency? Where have they been? The Me Too movement fell apart because they did not want to take on Joe Biden. They only wanted to go after folks in Hollywood who, I mean, quite frankly, a number of these deserve to be going after, but they wanted to focus on knocking out conservatives and making it political. And from the moment that Joe Biden was accused by a former staffer of rape, and the Me Too movement said, oh, no, she's not credible. Where prior to that, they were saying every woman needs to be believed, they have
When it
lost
suits them.
all credibility. Yeah, the Me Too movement has died.
I think that's a very good analysis and something that I've never really heard before, but it's actually true. He single-handedly killed that once pervasive movement. Very interesting, but you don't hear about it in the press, and that might be reflective of, believe it or not, brace yourself, it's only 7%. That's seven, not 70. 77, I'm sorry, 7% of of people interviewed, Americans, think that they have a good opinion of the press. 7%.
Yeah, in recent polls,
Well
the
deserved, by the
media
way.
the media now has a worse reputation than most politicians, than lawyers. Lawyers traditionally always got the lowest approval rating of any profession. The media has beaten them. It and let's face it, the more things come out because you had the media beating the drum over and over again. Russia, 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 collusion, collusion, collusion. Turns out to be fake. Hunter Biden, oh, it's a Russian disinformation. Turns out it's true. The defense of Joe Biden, as now an FBI whistleblower has said, not only does the FBI have evidence that Hunter Biden has been involved in criminal conspiracies, Joe Biden at best knew about them and at worst made money off of them. And the mainstream media has refused to cover this. So, yeah, people do not trust them.
Very interesting that about that figure because I'm one to think, how do people understand that? How do they know that? I guess maybe Americans are smarter than people give them credit for. Maybe they know when they're being bullshitted.
I think it's a matter of time, and I think COVID actually had a lot to do with it because every time information would come out about COVID and the mainstream media would go, no, that's a conspiracy theory. It turned out to be true over and over again. And the fact of the matter now is that more people are actually getting information from places like the Joe Rogan experience, from Carnivore Radio, from all of the conservative pundits that are on Rumble and those that are left on YouTube than the 6 o'clock news, the 6:30 national news. People are seeing, wait a minute, there is information out there and these guys are not telling us.
I think that's a fair assessment. There was no doubt about it. Getting back to the political theater, we have again. We're just going to kind of do this very quickly. Is that the once underwater candidates, that is Walker, Oz, Vance. Vance is now ahead in Ohio, and in Arizona, it looks like there's a statistical tie. And even Dr. Oz, who is 13 points behind Fetterman, is now essentially 2 points behind or deadlocked, certainly within the statistical era scheme of things. And then you have Herschel Walker, who was started out a very weak candidate, and I'm not saying he's the strongest candidate either, is now ahead of Raphael Warnock, who is essentially a hypocrite in chief, just as we said several times on Carnivore Bites, is in liberalism ideology. It's do as I say, not as I do. He happens to be a slumlord, that he was talking about the sanctity of not throwing people out. Well, they've thrown out very marginal people, meaning economically marginal people, plus the place is in a living hell. And on top of that, he's getting a stipend from the Ebenezer Church of over $7,000 a month. Now, my question to you, Dr. Lopping, do you think you can make do with a $7,000 a month housing allowance? Do you think you're okay with that?
Oh yeah, I'm good with that. It's
I think I
now
can
it is
squeak
amazing.
it out.
And honestly, I think I'm going to say that the economy is the biggest part of these swings because people see what's going on. And of course, every time the White House makes a statement, they're essentially saying, well, don't believe what you're seeing, believe what we are telling you. And people do not do that. But I think part of this big swing is actually that the voters are seeing the desperation of the Democratic Party. And the best example that I can give is a congressional candidate. I believe it was in Ohio, but I could be wrong. The Democrat took out campaign ads saying that the Republican candidate had been found guilty of possession, of drug possession, had been arrested on DUIs, and these were outright lies. And the local media, they had to the candidate took the Democrat to court to have these ads removed, but the local newspapers came out and said no, these are complete lies. The state attorney general came forward and said, "No, these are abject lies." When you're putting out lies like that, the electorate looks at this and goes, "Okay, you've got not, you'll stop at nothing. You just want to win. You've got nothing to campaign on. We're voting against you."
I think that's a very good analysis. And also, when you have Biden, who's desperate, calling the mayor of El Paso, pleading with him not to call a state of emergency with a border crisis. You have him draining the national oil reserves in a desperate attempt to
And
keep oil prices from skyrocketing, as well as begging the Saudis. I'm sorry, you were about to say something.
and announcing that he was going to start refilling the strategic oil reserve when oil hit $64 a barrel. The Democrats in Congress during the Trump administration refused to allow him to replenish the strategic oil reserves at $24 a gallon. But now we're going to have to replace it at three times the cost.
That is true, and I think also people out there, especially people close to retirement, are not going to be, let's say, there's not going to be exactly ecstatic about that. I think Investors Daily came out and said that this could be the worst year for investing since 1969, and that was a real shitty year.
It could be, and that's actually going to be a last minute shock, I think, to the Democrats. Because what they don't seem to be taking into consideration is that seniors are going to be getting their 401k statements on November 1st.
Uh oh.
And they are going to see what has just happened to their retirement savings.
Well, we might have more emergency room visits too when they have their cardiac arrest,
Yeah.
and can't blame them either.
And I think that is going to switch a lot of last minute votes from seniors. And let's make no mistake out of this. Even before the Democrats went nuts sending out absentee ballots, seniors voted in droves. They turn out.
No question about it. I think the only thing that can save Biden and his party is if he has a press conference. Just kidding. And he hasn't done one since February. You think that's just by luck? And there's actually a clip you love. Speaking about clips, and I think they're excellent, is they were talking about when he came out and said that we're closer to doomsday. Just off the cuff, no big deal. And
Yeah,
there's a scene of him running to the helicopter when people are saying, "Hey, Mr. President Biden, are we really close to Armageddon?" And you see him running away from his display of weakness and is actually it's actually
it is.
funny if it wasn't so sad.
I mean, it is frightening. I mean, now, to be fair, some of the things he has said have been absolutely true, but the fact that he is saying it is horrific diplomatically. I mean, his statement that we're closer to doomsday is actually true. The doomsday clock that measures how close we are to nuclear war, thanks to Putin, is closer than it's ever been. He made a comment about how bad it is that our ally Pakistan has nuclear weapons. Well, yeah, it is horrible that Pakistan and India, quite frankly, have nuclear weapons, but you don't make these statements when you're the president of the United States.
No, well, you don't make it if you're sane and you're not dementia. You don't suffer from
Well,
dementia.
I
But
mean
unfortunately,
that
that's
actually
not the case.
that actually brings up another question because he's made comments about the fact that he's doing what he did in the Senate. Does he actually understand the difference between a senator and the president?
Does he understand the difference between a giraffe and a
Yeah,
zebra?
yeah,
That's really the
probably
real
not.
question.
Yeah.
There you go. So yeah, so it'll be interesting to see what happens there. Speaking of the Democrats, you have Maxine Waters and the impeachment guru and Clyburn. Basically, if it was Republican, it'd be all over the 6:30 news. Basically, let's just say campaign irregularities, giving money to their family, which Biden did with his sister. He was basically running an undisputed territory in Delaware, yet he raised a lot of money, for his campaigns, which he really didn't need. And just by chance, I don't know why, but I'm sure she was uniquely gifted because from what I've seen, the Bidens, there's no family brighter than them. Was his campaign advisor, and I wonder if there was not any money changing hands on that one. No, never happened.
No. Well, I mean, the finances have been under scrutiny for quite a while. Um, Democrats, and I'm sure some Republicans are
Of
doing
course,
the
yeah, no,
same
there's no
thing.
doubt.
This is not, party specific. They're giving campaign money to their family members for, services rendered that are questionable. The New York Times just did a big piece naming loads of both Democrats and Republicans who have been involved in shady stock deals, and not just politicians. It's now come out that the people that work for the government agencies have been trading stocks in the companies that they are regulating.
Yes, Blumenthal and PP, Paul Pelosi. Paul Pelosi has a more vibrant portfolio than Wall Street experts,
Yeah, it's
including Berkshire
absolutely
Hathaway.
amazing. It's clearly insider trading. It's clearly things that other people have gone to jail for, and yet our government seems to be able to do it whenever they please.
Just when you thought things were getting better, a U.S. lab or maybe more than one have come up with and re-engineered an 80% lethal strain of COVID. In other words, simulating that. So who knows what could be on the high horizon on that, Dr. Lopkin?
Yeah, I think the big thing to remember about this is that this was a simulation.
Of course.
So the virus, fortunately, does not actually exist.
No, definitely not.
It's
It's just showing the capability, the
yes.
potentiality of something. That's all.
I mean,
Absolutely.
it is good that the simulation found this because it allows labs to start working on better vaccines and better therapeutics for more virulent and more deadly strains of the COVID virus. But it's important to remember that the simulation was about manipulating the virus in a lab. This is not something that scientists believe can happen on its own through natural mutation.
No, absolutely. Just something of
So,
noteworthiness is kind of a
yes.
heads up. Again, not an alarmist, not sounding the alarm, but don't get too passive about this COVID virus because there's no guarantee where it goes or what's the potential up and down from this. Um, and we're going to finish with speaking of screwing everything up from the economy to education to you name it. The Biden administration also obviously screwing up the international stage and Hamas, which is bizarre to me because desperately need America's intervention in the of any possible two-state solution. Basically, saying that they do not trust the Biden.
Yeah.
Who does trust them?
Well, no, it wasn't Hamas. It was Mahmoud
I mean, sorry,
Abbas,
Abbas. I'm
who
not
is
my fault.
yes,
Palestinian Authority. My fault.
who is in charge of the Palestinian Authority, has come out in comments to, of all people, Vladimir Putin, saying that they don't trust the Biden administration, they don't trust America, and will not negotiate with us for anything in the Middle East. And they are very clearly siding with Russia. Now, I don't really know why any country at this point would side with Russia. They're getting their asses kicked by Ukraine. So this is not a strong country anymore. And Saudi Arabia has sided with Russia in the OPEC Plus. Palestine is siding with them. It is a disaster internationally because Biden is now the laughing stock that the liberals always claimed Trump was.
which
And
was
even
not true.
right, and even more than that, it brings up the question, given the pro-Palestinian activities of the squad and Ilhan Omar in particular, if they are siding with Russia against us, does that make Ilhan Omar's actions and those of the squad treason?
Well, I
Now
think they're treasonous anyway.
I don't know the answer, on a legal basis, but it certainly seems that she is now taking actions that will enhance Palestine, enhance Russia. This is what they claimed that Trump was doing when they impeached him. And Biden reached out to Saudi Arabia trying to get them to put off cutting production until after the midterms.
Seems a lot worse than Trump's phone call, doesn't it?
Yes, it does. So you have these Democrats actually caught red-handed doing the things that they claimed that Trump did and impeached him for. And the big difference here, when Zelensky was asked about the Trump phone call, he said point blank, no, there was no pressure put forward. Nothing was ever held back from us. We were never being held hostage, in to get a favor from. On the other hand, Saudi Arabia has come out and said, yes, Biden did this. So
Kind of amazing.
you actually have concrete testimony in one case, and the Democrats, the mainstream media is not even talking about it.
The
The Democrats are,
7% mainstream media.
yes, the Democrats are trying to sweep it under the rug. Meanwhile, the allegations that they had no evidence of during the Trump administration, that they banged the drum night after night after night until they impeached him, and of course couldn't produce any evidence in the Senate to actually have him removed from office.
Other than that, how'd you like to play, Mrs. Lincoln?
Exactly.
Well, thank you, Dr. Lopkin. Another great edition of Carnivore Bites, who can be heard in many places. And we're pretty much on the upswing, aren't we?
We are, and you can catch every episode of Carnivore Radio at the Carnivore Radio website, xvadio.com/podcasts, the Apple Podcasts app, Google Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Stitcher, Amazon Music, Audible, and any platform that respects freedom of speech.
Thank you, Dr. Lopkin, and thank our listeners.
We'll see you next time.
Take care.